Hello, beautiful, and a warm welcome to Accepting. I'm Aline, your host, and in this extremely special episode, it's my honor to share with you the very first episode with my incredible spiritual mentors, Kristos T. Perry and Foster Perry. And I'm recording this the sunset before this goes out because it is Kristos T. Perry's birthday, and a couple of days later, it will be Foster Perry's birthday. And it feels so beautiful to honor them with the sunset, with the liminal hours. They are incredible. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Get yourself cozy, switch everything else off. When Kristos and Foster speak, we listen. And I am eternally grateful to them for suggesting and nudging and gently pushing me to starting a podcast. And this was a couple of years ago, the very first episode that was recorded. And it wasn't shared properly. It didn't go out to the world because, quite frankly, I didn't understand the platforms. So I am honoring all of my previous guests. And the very first special guests are Kristos T. Perry and Foster Perry, with huge gratitude to Kristos and Foster and huge gratitude for you for tuning in. So much love. Oh. Hello, and a warm welcome to episode 1 of series 1 of the Align with Aline podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, and I am delighted and honored that our first guests today are Kristos and Foster Perry of the Golden Hummingbird and Universal Mastermind. I have no words of gratitude. Now, for those of you who don't know Kristos and Foster, they have 30 plus years of teaching experience in shamanism, in hermetics, in witchcraft, in astrology, well, just to name a few. I will post all the links underneath so you can find everything about them as well. Now, Kristos and Foster have been teaching for 30 plus years all around the world. They have 20,000 plus students globally. And now they have started organizing to teach us online. And there are some incredible series on Vimeo's, now season 5, I believe, of beautiful teachings from their 30 plus experience that they are sharing so generously, so compassionately, with love and with a lot of laughter. So thank you so much for joining me today. I just can't tell you how grateful I am.
Well, it's great to jumpstart your podcast. Finally, we were talking about this for an aeon, basically, but here we are.
Come on, Aline.
Push.
So we've been talking a lot. I've been going on, and I've been really feeling about talking about the new moon influence, and we're now in the year of the water rabbits. So could you speak to us a little bit, please, about what is the water rabbit year, how we can work with that, and how you would recommend, when we're in a place at the moment, we're in retrograde free planets, hurrah! So how we can work with this and how we can keep the positive aspect of the water rabbit whilst everything is going on around us in the world, basically.
Well, the water rabbit definitely is connected to the moon, because rabbits themselves are symbols of the moon. You know, we have the Wicca symbol of the 2 rabbits jumping over the moon, the white rabbits. And when we get into feng shui, this is the black rabbit. But it is, again, a lunar influence over our lives, because the rabbit itself, thinks it can win the race, as the old story goes. And then it gets a little lazy, and then it lets the tortoise win because it falls asleep. So the negative detriment of a rabbit would be that it has too much hubris and, gets a little lazy and gets sleepy and doesn't stay attentive and active. So it's very different than a tiger year, which was incredibly active. We are now going to something much more diplomatic. I wouldn't say passive, but the rabbit itself, when we enter this, vibration, this frequency, let's say. Rabbit people in Chinese astrology tend to not show so much. There's a lot more going on underneath that they don't show. They're very easy to get along with. They're quite sociable. So it's a good year for networking. It's a good year to be social. It's a good year to come out. It's not terribly deep, rabbit people, I would have to say. They like to hide things, so you don't really know what they're thinking. And therefore, I would be very careful. But at the same time, the deeper mysteries of the moon, of course, is what I would explore this year. I would go much more inward. I would take care of myself. I would take care of my health. I would definitely prioritize that. It's very good for healers. It's great for wellness to go to healers this year, to go to places that are spas and, healing centers. That's really, it's time to take care of yourself.
Gorgeous.
You want to say anything, Kristos, about that?
You see, for me, I like to look in the past to see what the future brings, because everything comes in circles, in cycles, in waves, right? And that in astrology, of course, is a common understanding that nothing really is new. It just is interpreted by what the mindset of the global community is at this point. You see, to move a planet, we need everybody to move, or nothing moves in that sense. If you look at the water rabbit specifically, because it's an element within the sign, fire rabbits, water rabbits, fire tigers, earth tigers, and so on. So the water rabbit, water is definitely a purifier, is a cleanser. And what we will experience, and I think this already, is that the more emotional suppression happens, despite being spiritual and working on things and knowing things and getting prepared and so on, there is this element that has to break through eventually. So it is a year where I see sometimes out of a scratch or out of a little dot, it turns into a huge medical concept, for example, or one little financial decision, and it becomes this avalanche of issues. So the water rabbit represents what you can't avoid. You can go to a certain degree, but you cannot avoid ultimately your own responsibility. In other words, people come and say, look into my health, and I tell them, please take care of this, please take care of that, and look into this, and there's a surgery announced. But ultimately, there is this one personal element in your emotion that says, I'm sorry, even with this information, it's too late. You have to break through something. So the water rabbit, of course, the rabbit is not a courageous animal in that sense, you see. It's like security and safety. To some degree, it's also a year that represents denial. Oh, it's fine. Oh, it's good. Let's fake it till we make it. And, then the big surprise comes. But this is the idea. You have to really listen in spirituality, specifically in between the lines, because the water rabbit makes a lot of things blurry, but this is a year where you will be tested in your courage, good or bad. If we look in the past, Aline, we see that, for example, if you look at 1903 was a water rabbit year, and it was the first successful powered flight of a plane.
Wow.
All right. Excuse me. Now we have Elon Musk and his rockets. Now we have the new space telescope, you know what I mean? Where every day we discover new exoplanets where we basically could escape to, which we have to at some point. When you look at 1963, which was an intense water rabbit, again, water rabbit is all about peace and harmony and love. I don't see it at all, because I see that if you look at 63, 250,000 people marched for civil rights in the US. I think JFK was killed in that year, and Martin Luther King gave this big speech. You see what I mean? You see that there's nothing rabbit about it. But it is the rabbit. What happens to a rabbit that is fed up? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
What happens to a rabbit when you're fed up? You snap. right? Other rabbit years with different elements, by the way, for example, are 1999, the last year of the millennium. See, that was also a year, I believe, when Clinton was impeached in his trial. What is appropriate, what is not appropriate, you see? He was a rabbit, right? He was a rabbit, and, well, you know, a rabbit with a taste for willing assistance. You know? There's two to tango. So, and then 2011, for example, was a rabbit year where I remember 2011, a lot of politicians just resigned. It was one after the other. They said, I'm out of here. And the Iraq war ended. You see what I mean? The rabbit for me here is a wake up. It says to the society, wake up, because the bunny looks cute and sweet and fluffy, but he's got bite.
So
you know, he's got bite.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think always what I say is, when we look into astrology, and especially Chinese astrology, and compare it a little bit, we can look at years like repetitions, if you want. Certain elements, you know, will reappear in that sense. So of course, the water rabbit is important because it represents feelings, as Foster says, and the lunar element, and more than any other year, it is a spiritual year. And numerologically, we have a 7 year, which is also introspection. So it is really about being confronted with the inner mirror, you know, and that's why Foster always says, and I agree, if you don't do the inner work, spiritual practice is basically just a hobby. You know, there's no difference between that and getting your, you know, getting your nails done. You cannot remain superficial. The bunny, as much as we want to take the right to fluff it up and hug it, and you know, if he says, I have enough now, he's going to bite you, and the bite is intense. So I think that society-wise, we're going again through a questioning of politics, of human rights, of gay rights, of women's rights. Right now in Florida, you cannot mention the word black history. See what I mean? You know, so the question here for me is on a larger scale, and I think it will be a big theme in general in politics, especially people's politics as well. How far can free speech go?
Okay.
Yeah, free speech, yes, but free speech that says I close the door to something that happened, and by not mentioning, not teaching it, it doesn't exist. You see what I mean? That is, again, back to the cycle. That is when a little scratch will turn into a big cancer.
Okay.
You see? And no matter how you evolve, you see, the lesson is in your internal system. That is the idea. So we're going to have a year where people will be very fed up, and they will start snapping. We were talking with Foster a little bit about the mass shootings in California now, which are, interesting enough, by Asian people.
On the Chinese New Year.
On the Chinese New Year. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
It's a lot of
I'm not surprised. They're fed up.
Yes.
They're fed up. Let me kill you, and you see how that feels. You see? Eye for an eye, right? So it was so specific that I know exactly where this year is going. When on the lunar year, the year of the rabbit, right? They're taking out the gun. I'm going to go and shoot a couple of people. That happens once and twice and three. I mean, this is also, you know, almost normality in the US, you know. But again, I think we're going to have to question a lot our rules, our laws, and how far we allow laws to protect the word, you know what I mean? The thought, in that sense. Germany did it, you know, to this day. You cannot be a Nazi, you cannot be a fascist, you cannot, they don't even deal with, you know, they're just shutting it all down. It's in our constitution in Germany, you know, we're never going to go back to war. We can help, but we will not be dragged into it. We will not, again, go down that route. And so yes, you can say whatever you want, but if it is against the human nature and a deterioration of opinion, if you want, a deteriorated opinion, I think that's the way I want to say it, they're locking you up. You see, here where we are in US, free speech, free right, well, then something has to replace this, and the rabbit represents this replacement. Okay, you can fluff me up a little bit and feed me carrots, but I'm not human, and I don't understand the human ways.
Yeah. So do you feel it's very much a year of discernment and creating very healthy boundaries around us?
Yes,
yeah.
I think it's really necessary. Like Foster always says, the rules. You cannot say, these are my rules, and I'm going to stick with them until the day I die. That's ridiculous. You're shifting, you're changing, you're evolving, hopefully. And therefore, rules have to be reevaluated.
Well, look at flooding. In a rabbit year, you will have floods. That's what happens as a predecessor to this year. California had terrible floods all over the world. And now we have, these tremendous rains that are still occurring here. And on top of all the flooding is all the emotional, when people have a huge emotional reaction. You're talking about JFK's assassination, which was a country mourning. You have a tremendous flooding on that level of water. When you have these kind of mass shootings and people not doing any kind of inner work and they're exteriorizing everything, when the emotions, are flooding their systems and they start taking a gun and shooting everybody in a dance studio, that's quite a thing. I think there's also this idea of don't have any fun, don't enjoy it, don't enjoy the fertility, don't enjoy this matriarchy that's coming in this year. Because matriarchy, when it starts to enter, when Pluto did the full circle, and now that Pluto is bringing in a matriarchy after 1,000 years, really, of patriarchy, that's going to be, I think, what you're talking about, like a woke culture or a waking up. People are going to change tremendous amount of habits. That means people who are still stuck in patriarchy are going to act out with the gun, with violence. They hid many things. They made it very secretive what happened to JFK when he was shot. They cover it up so that I can see a lot of that happening this year. I think in a water year, it's going to be quite an eruption of underground emotional reactions to this emerging feminine quality that's entering the world.
Well, just yesterday, I think, yeah. I mean, just yesterday or this morning, I think I read that an ice plate the size of, was it New York? England or London, a massive piece just broke. You see, that water has to go somewhere. You know what I mean? That's the idea. Let me give for your listeners and your audience, Aline, a little insight how to understand the year in general, because it's not just the water rabbit and astrology. It is also the ascended frequency by which we're going through, because we are witnessing now transitions from exoplanets like Saturn, Pluto, Neptune into the next sun, which happens rare enough. And it's very specific to be alive during these transitions, because once, my Saturn moves into the next house, it stays there, or Pluto, it stays there until, the day I die, basically. It will not change. So certain changes are one-time changes, one-time shifts. We are in the shift now, but we're going to only see that. And the idea is that my guide said in that respect, when people come to you and they say, am I ready? Am I ready to do it? Like you did, right? Over the years, listen, I would love to do something, but am I ready? Should I be? If you have to ask if you're ready, then you're not. Because if you are ready, you're just going for it. And that is what this year provides. You see what I mean? It's almost a little bit the idea of, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it, which is true. You see? But the transitions of the exoplanets, I think, are really crucial. Because when a Jupiter moves every 12 years, a Saturn every 28 years, a Pluto, 200 years or something, you know, a long period. It is one thing to be born in that time period, and then you experience the society in that sense. But even from that point, numerologically, energetically, spiritually, you see, whenever planets shift so global, right? We call these ascended circles in my tradition, in my school. So it's called that whoever did the work ascends. Whoever goes ascends. And there's no way back in that sense. So not everybody will do that or wants to do that or needs to do that, you see. So it's important for people of a spiritual nature not to try to convince and drag people into ascended states where they have no business being. It sounds harsh, you know what I mean? But I'm not going to make you run a marathon because I love it so much when I know that you're just not capable of running it. And say, do me the favor and do it. You will get hurt, you see? So again, and it's not about I'm going to be higher, you're going to be lower. It's not that stuff. You know, I really recommend you guys listen to our last podcast, which is a channel, basically. And I think because I had to listen to it to hear what I said. You know how that works with me. And
Yeah.
you know, and Foster asked, of course, the most appropriate questions. And the answer that I got out of it, or the main theme was, oh, help me, Foster. It was the stop thinking in separation. There is no the fifth dimension and the first dimension and the angels and the demons and God and the goddess and all that stuff. There is none of that, you see. But the more we have been trained to systemic belief, I can believe in this, but not in that. And I can believe in this, but not in that. In Kabbalah, we call it Chokmah, which is, for me, the place of all possibilities, you see. And some people who enter this state of mind are one step away from ascension, which the next one is Keter. So you're on of your house, so to speak, and you see reaching that mountain, you know. That's the idea. But Foster always says, and and I'm always frustrated, and I say to Foster, why did this not work and that not work? And it says people don't do the inner work. They just rummage through it. They rush through it. They want to be masters in 5 days and solve all their problems in a weekend, 2 weekends usually, you know, and everything over, you know. That's the idea. That's why when we do these Vimeos, it is 9 in a season, and basically the participant has a weekend to work with it, and then they have the Q&A with him on Monday. Next. And it's like, oh my God, it's like pushing one other, but that's exactly what it is. It is to create an intensity in various forms of vibration. Because the first video was about sex magic, and the last video that we're not doing is about cities, which is the Hermetic tradition in India, for example. But there is no difference to it, no matter how we call it. You see what I mean? It's all one big push to get people into their own ascension. Because I don't know what's going to happen once you ascend, you know, because it's so individual. But as I said, you know, Aline, time to become a teacher. Aline, time to create a voice. Time to, you know, I don't know for how long we said that, but bless your heart. Finally, you know, this feels normal, right? This feels normal. That's what you should have done. Absolutely. So now that you're in your ascending role, there you are.
And I remember you talking as well how the Vimeos as well, it's very much creating the energy of a mystery school as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's giving people a lot of powers. This year, you know, we started with sex magic, where every time you have sex now, you're creating powers. You're charging things with it. You're doing different things. So you never waste an orgasm. You never waste masturbation. You never waste the sexual act. It all becomes spiritual now in higher tantra. The last one now is even higher tantra. We're going into larger rituals of tantra. But more than that, in between, we talked about love, Hawaiian love, the connection between your lower, middle, and higher selves, the understanding of aloha, So we went from sex to love to the Goetia, which was, I want people to work with spirits. And there are Cupidic spirits there. There's spirits that are full of love, and there are also other spirits that are quite harsh teachers. But when you are a shaman or a witch or any person who all of a sudden wants to work with spirits for your own inner teachers, for your own guidance, for your own understanding of your own brain, when you put them all together, you're empowering people on a very high level. What are they going to do with these powers? Because that's why we move to cities. What are you going to do when you're doing practices of non-duality, like Kristos always saying yes to everything and no separation, and there's only oneness? You are basically talking about the essence of yoga, the essence of what all of yoga has been teaching and India has been teaching for a few thousand years. So when we are in this particular state of union, whether it's orgasm or over, because in orgasm, you go into a void kind of state in which you are essentially connecting to the divinity. And I wanted people, especially this year, to feel finally happier in their bodies, happier about sex, and much more pleasurable. That it doesn't have to be a hard karma kind of life, that it can also involve a great deal of pleasure. And that's what it has come to me so far this year, this idea of we're embracing sexuality. All my judgments around sexuality and yoga are finished now. I'm not saying to everybody to have sex. I'm just saying that we're clearing out every kind of dogma, every kind of belief in the subconscious mind this year. And that way we open up very clearly to spirit and to different spirits who teach us. At least that's what I do in the Vimyas. Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me. Now, I remember when you came back from your sacred tour in Egypt, and the main teaching that you had there was yes. So could you talk to us a little bit about that, please? And obviously that's been very, very, that's been very high in all your podcasts as well, and especially the most recent one, which is incredible, and you have to watch it, by the way.
You see, I think where guidance comes from, I speak only through my perspective, because it's coming through my brain, but not my intelligence, because that stuff usually is, when I listen to my own sessions, I'm like, that's not me. That's a little too an element higher of what I am interested in, even at this point, from a human point. So when perspectives come in, and they're repeating, and I'm paying attention, the yes tribe. I think in Egypt, they used to call it the yes tribe. And it began a little bit with the idea, we are the yes tribe. We are not saying no ever on the other side, so-called other side, right? But the concept was simply, if you say yes, and that doesn't mean I say yes to an abusive person. I say, yes, you are an abusive person, and I take the right. You see what I mean? Because the replacement of the word karma is the word yes. Karma, in my tradition and in my experience especially, has always been described as and been used and misused by people who love their drama. Drama loves an audience. It's one of our other podcast titles. It's my karma to be with this man. He has to do something right. It's usually a woman who makes this crap. And then also, occasionally I have to carry the karma of my family. Again, I don't say it's wrong, because there are elements of it. And my guides at some point, the best way to dissolve this karma is to say yes to it. Yes, I acknowledge it. Yes, I'm responsible for my part of it, not for every. Yes, I'm okay with where I am. Yes, I want to change my body, but I will not love it when it's changed. But I say yes to what is. In other words, you cannot transform your health if you say, oh, now it's crap, but once it's better, then I'm going to like it. You have to get out of these limitations and segmenting of emotions. And so the word yes sounds weird, but it is really more of a frequency more than anything else, a frequency that is applied, that says, yes, I know That's what wakes me up. Being woke means to know that you have contributed on some level to the experience you have. There is no other way. That's law. I don't say, people say, oh yeah, that would be great to be gassed up in a chamber in Auschwitz. Yeah, that's what I want. Of course not. Of course not. You see? But when you end up in a situation as dramatic and you say, yes, something in me must have contributed to this, because this is not just a little personal experience. This is a global experience. This is, you know what I mean? It is, you see, in that sense, let's dramatize a bit. Genocides, the biggest genocide happened from Africans to Africans. You know, if you want genocides, that's where it happened. Africans, you know, killed Africans. So the whole Jewish thing and the whole Holocaust, and my God, what happened to the Mexicans and to the Native Americans, for Christ's sake. And you know what I mean? We find this everywhere, but look at a society like Japan, for example, you see, who are brutes. I mean, that was a really warrior Mars kind of country. And look at the refinement of it. I don't say they don't have problems, but look how they chose to say, yes, we are responsible for all this. Yes, we want to get better. Yes, we want rules. And yes, we agree to all apply these rules. They apply to everybody. In other words, you're not better than me. And this doesn't make you more entitled to this. It's the opposite of America, you know, where people call them manager because they don't like the weather. You know what I mean? I mean, it's amazing to me. The entitlement here is mind-blowing to me, I have to tell you. And yet, my guide always says, this is a yes world. No one ever was pushed into this planet and forced to incarnate. Everyone who is here said yes. And so for us, that's guidance. For us, if everybody could say for 1 second, yes, I agree with what I chose, otherwise I wouldn't have chosen it, it would transform the whole consciousness of this planet. You see what I mean? So the idea of the yes is a form of agreement, right? It's an agreement and an acknowledgement, a woke acknowledgement that we are here on this planet to learn to manipulate energy. And that's what all the, you know, ETs and extraterrestrials and other civilizations, not all, but a lot, have ahead of us. You know, they're doing it already. See, and that is the idea, breaking through a wall of social and religious manipulation. You cannot, and of course, you know, women are, you know, on the lowest level of the food chain, so to speak, you know, unless they have some value. So, like Foster says, this is a time of the matriarchy. See, and even women don't do everything right. You see, that's the idea. So now we want female leaders, and it goes to crap, right? Or we have Jacinda, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who did a great job, but she's being, you see, the misogyny in our societies is mind-blowing. I read, you know, with Foster, sometimes we talk over breakfast and lunch, you know, when we have a little meal. I said, can you imagine how many people are, because Madonna is now going on tour, right? The 40-year tour and so on. So everybody calls it the broken hip tour, right? The broken hip tour. And I thought, and this is women. The misogyny that comes from women is the most dangerous. A woman who criticizes another successful woman, especially, will never be a friend of another woman. Absolutely. Never. See, they usually are infected by their husbands and their partners and their fathers. They think you see what I mean? And all I think is, oh God, do better. Do better, you see, because we're talking about somebody who achieved something with no, I have to say, I do admire her, you know, as a person, Madonna. I think what she did is amazing, amazing. So the last thing she needs is snide comments at this point. You see what I mean? Because
yeah.
the ground of these comments is misogyny. That's what it is. It's like Christians, or Satanists. There's no difference. They're all angry. What they have in common, they're all angry about something. Satanists are like angry Christians, and angry Christians are basically just entitled, consumers of capitalism, nothing else. What do you guys want? We have to get back to a rabbit mind, you see? We cannot just fluff up a pillow and say, oh, it's all good. So the first thing that me and Foster agreed on is, let's say yes to something. Let's say yes to it, because it's easy to go back and say, oh God, we shouldn't have done this. We shouldn't have done that. And if we did this and if we did, you see, I can't stand that at all. So yes, we agreed to do this. We agreed to move. We agreed to change. We agreed to get on. We agreed to do something, you see, and that is the opposite of karma. I hope that makes sense, but that is what it is.
No, absolutely. It really does. Thank you. And it's interesting you mentioning about Satanists, because I posted something the other day, and it was about reset with a new moon. And I was guiding through a process, and I shared it with the world. And it's really interesting you say about the misogyny of women, because a woman wrote on there something about, and I didn't know what this was. I don't know if you've heard this expression, here's your wig, sir. I had to look it up. I had no idea what it meant.
Yeah, it's the German word for yes. Yes.
And then somebody,
19.
and then another woman put Satanist. And okay, thanks very much. But but it was really interesting, because I could have, and because of because of all the amazing teachings with you, I just said yes. And that was okay. That was their entitled, their opinion, but I don't have to take that on. And I'm going to continue saying yes to what I'm doing,
Right.
So yeah.
That's exactly what it is. I don't know, Foster, how do you deal with this?
Well, I'm having an experience this year of fertility of the rabbit. That's why I'm talking about sexuality.
Yeah.
Because if you're going into anything about rabbits, they multiply. And so I'm also looking at, why do women have to get married? Why do they have to have babies? This fascination now with only the lower development. You just have babies. This is your purpose. When I am surrounded, 50% of everybody who comes to us do not want to have children, want to be independent in this life, even if they have moments of, I wish I had a mother, or I wish I had a partner, or I wish I had somebody. Actually, many, many women are choosing not to have that, and not to be told that they have to have a baby and they have to have a husband. So then if you're not going to have all those things, what else do you want? And that's when I started to go into this fertility idea. What about the idea that all this universe is created by whatever? In India, it's Shiva and Shakti, and their union. What if it's this union inside of us that is part of our ascension? Maybe we have to look at things very, very differently. When I see somebody saying that you're a sadist, it's a huge judgment, and it comes back to them, unfortunately, because you're dredging up your shadow. You're basically saying that you can't accept some part of yourself, and now you're going to project it onto me, and you're going to make me wrong for what's going on inside of you in your subconscious mind for so many, a century of putting down people. Because if I get into Satanism, you could say healers are Satanists, everybody who does healing work, everybody who's been doing, birthing babies and all sorts of things, what we call, the women who always helped in a person's life spiritually. You could say everything spiritual then is Satanism. And if you're doing that, you're creating a huge shadow. And that particular shadow you're sitting on top of, and it will erupt eventually, whether in the society you're going to be confronted by your shadow, because there's something going on when you raise the frequency of a planet. You're forced to look at your own projections. You're seeing what is your illusion, what is your Maya, and it hits you right in the face, and everybody notices it now. When I'm around young people and somebody says, oh, you're a Satanist, everybody turns around like, well, who are you to talk?
Yeah.
What kind of, judgmental Christian are you? Do we really need you in this next century? That's what kids say, especially to me. Or they say, who are you to put down transgender, Ron DeSantis, who do you think you are, not allowing Black people to have their own kind of educational system just because you're a racist and anti-gay, like a Bolsonaro? You know, a lot of us have had enough of that. Not that we're screaming liberals or something, but really enough is enough. This all involves sexuality and the right of a person over their body. You know, they tried to get rid of all abortion rights in US, and now we have a huge conflict about that. So when are we allowed to have the pleasure in our bodies? When are we allowed to finally accept people as they are and accept this world as it is and see it clearly as it is, that all of it is divine? And we can go off, you know, we can be imbalanced in our subconscious mind and have all sorts of perversions and other things that we do have to face within ourselves, because they will be projected out. They will eventually come to the surface. So when somebody calls me a Satanist, I think, what are they hiding? What kind of weird judgments are they hiding about women, gay people, about everything in life? And what kind of a limited life is that?
Yeah. No, it's absolutely, I agree. Absolutely, I agree. The people who scream in politics anti-gay are being caught usually with hookers, gay massage friends, gay assistants, you know, the assistants and so on, you know, and that is something that is really, how can I say? Yeah. It's also funny how, and I want your listeners to also understand, you know, if you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist, you know, you should not comment on other faiths, you know, because it is inherited in their religion. Go from door to door and praise the Lord, you know, the word of Jesus Christ. Who invited you? This is, for me, I think, something where I'm surprised that we don't have more casualty murders here, because, you know, I would shoot somebody in the face if they would come with that. You know, I didn't invite this. People say very often, why are you so much into witchcraft or Wicca or paganism? Well, it's the only religion in the world that has never, you know, declared war in the name of God. It's the only one, you see. And if you read the Bible, and I did 28 versions of it, that's how many there are, because, you know, the manipulation goes on. You know, I don't want to be part of that religion. It's not love. It's love as long as you shut up and don't do nothing and don't question anything and just follow me, and me, or else I'm sending you down the fires of the pit of hell for 17,000 millennia, but I love you. You see, that is bullshit to me. That is total bullshit to me. And I am an occultist. An occultist is somebody who studies the religion. That's what it means. Every Christian is an occultist, because when you read the Bible, that's what occultismos means. It means to read and study the religion. You know, that's, you know, a little culture for all you, for, you know, because, you know, I love this country, I have to tell you, but Americans think frozen yogurt is culture. You know, so trust me, you know what I mean? No, you know, and I think Olive Garden is a restaurant. So
the occult is also about what's hidden. So we're also looking what is behind the Bible. What is the Sumerian text behind that? What is the older text from Babylon? And we keep going further back now to get to some semblance of the truth.
Pre-Abrahamic, you see, pre-Abrahamic, the religion of Asherah, the mother god, Sophia, Asherah, Hecate, Isis. You know, there was a mother god as a principal supreme divinity, as well as the family. What I want to say is, and people think, or is it me personally, that I'm against Christians or something, and I'm not. I just am surprised that no one, well, there's a lot of younger people involved, Christians, for example, Catholics especially, and they question the scriptures. And that is, to me, the most exciting thing. You see, this is a woke Catholic, a woke, you know what I mean? Somebody who says, wait a minute, it doesn't say this at all. This is not mentioned at all. This is not even part of this at all. There are people who are almost in an academic way really confronting the scriptures and saying, you know, no God would talk like this. You know, no God would talk like this in that sense. And you see, and so And the second thing is when a religion excludes women. Okay, people think Buddhism is such a lot. Come on, give me a break. Buddhism is patriarchal to the bone. Patriarchal to the bone. Give me a break. Okay, that's the idea. Pope is
Brahmanic India. Brahmanic India is
Brahmanic India.
full of this caste
Right.
system.
You
You know,
see,
only Tantra was
you know,
breaking through the caste system and treating women
right.
equally.
You see what I mean? And you can repress a natural state of balance as long as, because it's not about now the matriarchy will take over and basically, you know, it's the same like white people in America are so afraid that now black people with power could spin the wheel against them. You know, now they have power, you know, the Beyoncés and the Jay-Z's and the Kanye's of the world. Now they're gonna mobilize against us. Well, you know, the key is balance. Male, female, electric, magnetic. We live in a polarity, and the key is to learn to be in the balance of the polarity. I don't say there's no God. I believe in God, of course I do, but by no means as a vindictive, judgmental, you know, leader of politics, right? Let's not forget, with Foster, we had a lot of discussions about this over the last 2-3 years. You know, with COVID especially, a lot of channeling happened, okay, which is bullshit, because the channeling has a very specific quality and training in its core. And if you don't have this, I can see it. Bless your heart, what comes through, but you know, it comes from a very different perspective. Trust me, it takes a piece of your body. Whenever I channel, I need time to recover. Okay, but energy takes care of your body. But the idea is that we talked with Foster about it and said, what is this? Look at how much political propaganda is now in channels. The masters of what was it, Orion, come through and they say, trust Trump.
Oh my
Wow.
And so on and so on. I thought, what the hell is this? Or he would show me these 3-hour videos that people would send. And at the very end, it was a propaganda video for the Republican Party to please support Trump because he's the Messiah. You see, that is the problem I have, Aline, independent from Foster, because I'm a very separate person in this whole thing. I'm not a shaman. I came in as an additional teacher, but I come also from a hermetic background. You know, for us, it's not common to expose ourselves to such a degree. You see, we're more behind the scenes people. So, and one reason is when I see this crap, really this crap, and I think that these people are frauds, they're liars, they're frauds, and they're basically just scammers, because at the end, by the way, it's always about money. Guarantee about money, send me money, the world will end, send me money. Well, what do you need money if the world ends? You know, there was this guy in New York who had a whole channel about the apocalypse, which was like December. And he said, send money. And people send money. And like, why is it? I mean, there are so many demented people in the world. Yes.
You also have to be careful about harvesting, because people want a lot of energy by getting attention, because now we have social media.
Oh, yeah.
So people need attention to harvest their viewers.
Yeah.
And eventually you have to say, if that's not my intention to harvest viewers, if it's my intention actually to give back, that's a very different social media than just me and give me attention. And I take that attention as power and I use it in my life for what? I don't know. Where is it being redirected? Is it being redirected to something other than materialism? We have to ask ourselves that with social media. You know, people always ask me, how could you move to Las Vegas? A shaman in Las Vegas, very funny. But we came here and it's actually quite lovely to be around. You know, I go to the gym, it's 60% African Americans, you know, and Hispanic and full of
Asian.
Chinese, Asian and everything. And you just fall in love with it. You have the whole world and you enjoy it. It's like a relief. It's a relaxation.
You know, because we after COVID and after 20, by the way, exactly the same line. How can you be a shaman and live in Beverly Hills? 3 years ago, I heard exactly the same line. And these are people who live in some council flats in London, basically, you know, and let the government pay for them. But here I am being judged on the other side of the planet. You know, it's amazing to me. It's amazing, right? It's really amazing. But the thing is, I have to say, after LA and during COVID, and I said, you know, let's see where we're going here. And it was all about transition. So I was sure we're not going to stay in one place for too long. And we went to Palm Springs, Indian Wells, which is, you know, all Palm Springs area.
Very white,
unbelievably. And we had this impression it's going to be this wonderful, gay, liberal, you know, wonderful place. You know, I ended up in fucking MAGA land. Sorry, but this is what it was. It was white MAGA. It was all MAGAs. I cannot, I mean, of course, they were very nice to us because I'm, you know, blue-eyed and white, right? I mean, Foster also passes as white, but very nice. But I'm telling you, it was white. It was judgmental. There was a lot of Trump flags around. And I thought, where the hell have we ended up here? You see what I mean? So I said to him, listen, this can't be it. Beautiful house, great place, wonderful. I mean, it was a glorified old folks home, you know? That's what it is. It's really pretty, but it was quite white. You see what I mean? And if you have racist gay people, I thought that can't be it. This can't be it. I said, I need the world the way I live it, with all colors and all races and all, you know, and we came to
all
Vegas.
Beliefs, all political views, everything.
Beliefs, see? And funny enough, we came here, and to my surprise, it's quite comfortable to be here. And as Foster says, I met more Black people than the last 5 years. She's like, thank God. You know, you see, that's the idea. So movement is important. I think moving forward is important, you know, and progress is important in that sense. But when we look at you know, I think that moving forward is a form of nurturing yourself. You know, I think nature will nurture you. Whenever you connect with nature, now I'm not the shaman, but when you connect with nature, and my guide said, I think in the channel, trees are psychic. So you want to develop psychic energy, you need to connect with trees, which I thought it makes total sense, you see, because they're interconnected, you know, they're interconnected. And I think that moving forward, leaving, arriving, shifting, changing is in our nature. And I think that is our nature, to change. And the acting on the change is a form of nurturing. You see, that's the idea. So I think that nurturing has a very big value here.
No, absolutely.
It's the action, it's the movement, it's the doing. That's the nurture for me.
That was something I was wishing to talk to you about as well, about well, my religion, if you like, is nature. So I adore being in nature, and more I feel that, especially with the creativity, you mentioned about rabbits, I'm surrounded by rabbits here, but I am everywhere. And it feels very much we're connecting more with Gaia. So how do we connect more with, to speak to listeners, how do we connect more with crystals, with plants, with animals? How do we go about that when it's one of the things when, you know, that there's people saying, well, that's a load of rubbish, for example. So getting past that and believing and feeling and going into nature and hugging trees and and
when you go into matriarchy, especially now, when we're going into the feminine-based understanding, that automatically you love animals. It's the beginning of the consciousness of animals, how we treat animals, whether, you know, do we want to eat animals? How can we do it in quite a new way, you know, to honor the spirit of an animal? We're turning back to that now. And I think a great deal of people are becoming psychic through their pets because they care about their pets. They fall in love with them like their children. And then they start to say, I don't know what's going on with my pet. And the vet can't quite get it. So then they go to somebody who can speak, interspecies communication with an animal. We are surrounded by people, whether they're in Singapore, whether they're in Germany, that are animal communicators.
Yeah.
And they're really quite serious. They're very psychic, and they're also love animals. And they teach love. They teach unconditional love. And this is the best way, beyond religions, beyond all the divisions and separations, to get people to finally understand spiritual principles through their animals. And I think that's a wonderful. Plus, you're talking about the water rabbit. So you need to go to rivers this year. You need to go to lakes. You need to go to brooks. You need to go to bodies of ocean to purify, to cleanse yourself, because water is purification. And when you're around a certain amount of negative ions, when you're waking up early in the morning, and getting these ions, or walking near water with these ions, when you meditate, it's much more powerful. And, all the stuff that we get during the day, everybody's opinions, all the ways our auras interact with other people. So we get too much negativity, glomming onto us. You need to take baths when you get home, or you need to take a shower. You need to get it off you. That's water. Water always soothing, cooling it down when you're too hot-headed. That's why we had that experience. Remember in Los Angeles, our whole garden got filled with snails because it was so hot and the snails had to cool down the plants. So instead of getting rid of them, we just embraced the snail with its little home. And once we did that, once everything cooled down and we understand we were too hot, we had to cool down our own inflammations, everything, all the snails left overnight.
Let me say from a hermetic point, because the way you asked it is, how can we connect more with? Which I learned quite early, and this is how you understand it now, that nature will adopt a way of communicating with us, because it's easier for an animal to speak to you than a human. You see what I mean? Because the animal or the plant or the crystal is not filtered
with subconscious imprints,
with subconscious stuff. There is no, there is no tree that says, I'm happy, but my parents left me. There is no such a thing. Or the rabbit that says, or the cat that says, I wonder where my mother is. It doesn't exist, because in nature there is the tiger has the pup stays with the tiger for about 6, 7, 8 months, I think, and then she's gone overnight and never returns. You see, and that is what nature does, always progressing and knowing when it's done. It's humans who have to buy our children apartments and cars and pay for their education and be loving and forgiving and all that crap. That's the idea. So again, this is unnatural, but interesting. Let me say something, because I know that you have cats. The thing is, cats, for example, didn't get domesticated per se, because look, they're very individual, right? Dogs, by the way, did not get domesticated. They just vibed with humans, liked them, stuck around, and started to learn to communicate in a human emotional way, because the larynx doesn't develop speech in that sense, right? But don't we have parrots who can literally, you know what I mean, who speak better English than most English people, right? And you're surprised, but what happens here is nature speaks to us because nature learns our ways. And a cat, for example, the meowing of a cat, when a cat talks to you, that's not natural to a cat. They don't do this in nature. You will never see a panther going, it's just not happening, because obviously if it's wild, it's not around people, right? But a cat stuck around, adapted to you, and started to mimicking what you do. Well, you know, she's opening her mouth and something comes out, so I'm going to do the same thing. So they're replicating movement and sound to convey their emotion. But the language of nature is purely emotional, of course. See? So as a side effect, you understand what I mean, Aline?
Yeah.
From a side effect, you cannot not. I knew a woman who said all that crystal stuff is hoo-hoo, but she was wearing diamonds, rings, rubies. And I'm like, okay. You know, and she said, I gotta have this malachite, you know, but I don't believe in it. You see what I mean? The thing is, we don't buy crystals, they choose us. They choose us. They come to us. Plants come to us.
Animal.
The same with an animal. How often, you know, we have a ring on our door, which is, you know, that ring doorbell, but suddenly also you're connected to every ring doorbell in America, basically, or in your neighborhood. So 3 times an hour, I lost my dog, my parrot flew away, look for my cat, please look for Buffy, please, you know what I mean? You see what I mean? Animals help us to interconnect with our own species.
Yeah.
And so why would a dog leave or run away or do this? To make you talk to another human being for more than just, where's my money, where's my work, I'm tired and I'm hungry. To go beyond that, you see? So that you're helping, you see what I mean? Nature is a purely emotional consciousness in that sense, but it doesn't have vocal cords in that sense. So the cat comes and says, oh, nice people, you know, and when they come, and with cats, when they do this, right, and they snuggle on you, they don't snuggle, they mark you. Mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like peeing on you. No, just we don't like the pee, so they snuggle and mark you basically. But every kind of talking, and some dogs have that too, like huskies, right, who are talking, they basically say, I'm going to send you my emotion to tell you how I feel, but I'm going to mimic your vocal cords, so to speak, you see? So, you know, some of us are, of course, very loving. And you ask, how can we communicate with nature? You have to love nature.
Yes, yeah.
You have to love nature, from the bee to the mouse to the rat, to the mosquito, to the piranha, to the crocodile. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's not just, I love the dog, but that thing, oh my God. See, that's the idea. So when you see the purpose of a mosquito, if you see the purpose of a bee, you know, without bees, we would basically eat each other, right? You see, and it is this network that we have of consciousness. And when you love animals, and we think they're all like cuckoo, like the tree huggers, right? Like, what's wrong with them? But it is this unconditional love that we show nature, and that is what helps us communicate, and that is what develops with animals healing abilities, and with trees psychic abilities.
And also telepathy, would you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You see, why does a cat rarely, to communicate, sits on your third eye? You know, it always goes on the belly or the lap, right? Because the communication, the intercommunication of telepathy happens through the second chakra, not the third eye. Here we get it, here we see it, but it's not like we're getting, otherwise a cat would sit here all day. Or a dog would just put his butt here. You know, it does that. Always
the cat teaches independence. It teaches sensuality.
Yeah.
It always teaches more of a feminine way. So that kind of independent, femininity, I go out when I want to, you know, I do what I want to do. I take care of myself. It's something that everybody needs to learn. This is when cats really come to us. But they specifically like temples. They like houses that are like temples.
Like energy.
They like the astral world because they're always protecting their owners and seeing things in the astral. You know, reminding us that there's much more than the physical world.
Yeah.
And then when we get into dogs with loyalty, when people have lost their loyalty to each other, when children go away and are not loyal, then you get very close to a dog, because this is the noble qualities. So the dogs, from in its most wild form, is the wolf. When you need to find your wild soul, you go to the origin of dogs. And if you want to find your origins, your true self in the wild, like a jaguar or a panther, your true nature, that's your wild self that you should never lose contact with, to the point of the actual dog next to you. Because they will teach you that how you approach a dog, or how you approach nature, or how you approach any plant, any tree, all the plants talk to each other. All the trees connected under the soil, for sure. But they have a mass communication all day long, in which how you are to a tree tells all the other trees. How you are to a plant, it starts to communicate. How you are to animals, they tell all the other animals. And then you are accepted. This is a thing in shamanism, when you go into the rainforest, and if the forest is very, very loud and all of a sudden it quiets down and it's quiet, it means you're not really accepted. You're not part of the forest. So eventually in shamanism, you train yourself enough that you're part of the forest, that you're communicating with everything, that you're in a telepathy, that everything is alive. And then you walk into the forest and it just continues. It lets you be part of all its sounds. Welcomes you. But it doesn't do it in the beginning. It doesn't do it for normal people. And that is the profound spirituality all around us. The ability to have telepathy and communicate with all of life, and respect it, respect each other. They teach us exactly how to live here. This is the way of balance. And human beings can get very way off balance. They don't balance the elements in themselves. They don't balance their natures. And they go very, very off. And then comes bizarre opinions, dogmas, even religious ideas that are fanatical and too overzealous. And then you have to stop and question, where is the origin of this in their subconscious mind? Why am I listening to their shadow? You don't need to listen to it. You have a choice now, really, especially with internet and social media and the networking. You don't have to listen to people's, bald opinions that have nothing to do with you. And and you don't want to include them in your life. And I think this is the beauty of what we're living. We're making choices now. This I don't want to be associated with. This I don't want to be associated with. But I'm going to live the way I want to live. That I feel, animals are teaching me, plants are teaching me, and what I feel inside. I start to follow whatever, my soul. Because your soul is your heart is what's communicating with nature. It's what's communicating with animals. I mean, Kristos is about higher mind development. His purpose is the development of the mind, really. It's quite a high mental, but he has a very sensitive, feeling, emotional side. So he does both developments. And it's like having knowledge without wisdom. If you don't have wisdom, if you don't feel it, you're not going to have wisdom. And they have to be, built at the same time. You can't have one without the other unless you're too imbalanced.
Right.
I mean, Kristos, you've always taught about the balance of the elements, which is the shamanic idea. If you're out of balance in one element, and you must go into fire, earth, air, water, all the different aspects of yourself, like in Chinese medicine, like in many things. If you're in balance with the elements, many things happen.
Well, the thing is also, Aline, what means balance of elements? Because people are trained also in our field, or stimulated to think in a certain way, which is get rid of something. When you get rid of something, that you're going to be in balance, because then, and exactly the opposite happens, because when you cut off the foot from your leg because there's something off, you're not going to run a marathon. See what I mean? Or in a less dramatic way, if I try to overcome something and I keep thinking about what bothers me, there's going to be a gap between your emotion and your thoughts. See, that's the idea. Let me give you an example of how I would approach this as a practice, as a daily practice, because we can't prevent it. We're getting through stuff. I mean, that's just life. and we're having phones with us, so we're asking to be disrupted and distracted. When I remember when I was in music a long, long time ago, and in production, we would work on a track and it just wouldn't come together. And usually I was a guy who said, we're going to stick with it until it's finished because, deadline, studios are expensive. And I had a producer who said, let's put it aside, do something else. And then we returned to that other track later, and there was a solution. And that is balance. That is balance. So when I'm an obsessive, self-absorbed, melancholic bitch, I don't say get rid of these elements. I say acknowledge them, say yes to them, and change or refocus your thought on what is the balance. Without the need to think that in order to feel the balance or see the balance, I need to get rid of this. And this is the biggest lie and propaganda psychology created, psychiatry created, spiritual gurus created, teachers, and all that stuff is get rid of something. There is no way to expulse, is that the right term in English? And to expulse an old emotion. There's no way.
To accept our shadows, yeah.
By accepting and by recognizing this is something that must have vibrated in some shape or form with my contract, with my agreement. I'm going to get rid of this. That's why I admire people who are basically what we would call a mess. People who are alcoholics, drug users, and then they get sober and they make something out of their life. This is for me incredible, impressive, I have to say. Or people who come out as transgender, transsexual. I admire these people because I think they are walking teachers of evolution, basically, because it really represents the idea of breaking through a beast, an inner shadow, if you want. One of my favorite tarot cards is Strength. In Crowley, it's called Lust, which is more poignant, I think. And it represents a virgin who basically, a beautiful virgin who has this beast beside her that growls at her, right? And she says, just shut up and sit down now. Hear you, sit down. She's not getting rid of it. You don't see a sword, you don't need a torch, you don't see kerosene, you don't see a hand grenade. She's not interested in getting rid of it. She said, I'm responsible for you. The way I made you, that's the way I will take responsibility for it. You see? And by controlling the shadow, she says, you're here, I made you, I contributed to you. So you are my problem, but also you are my responsibility. You see? And that's what people with an obvious addiction to things do. I think it's one of the most impressive spiritual aspects to observe, even if they think it's just, willpower and good luck, basically. But it is in its nature spiritual. Same idea. So my advice is, because I hear this every day, Foster hears it more than me. What can I do every day? Look at everything, say yes to everything, be grateful for all that you have. And if something bothers you, don't look at it. Acknowledge it and say, okay, I get it. It's there. Now let me see what else is there. And make a deliberate intention to choose and to focus on something that feels better. You see, I remember in Montessori, I had my kids in Montessori for only a year. Then I took them out because they were like just dumbing down, basically. That's just my opinion. Don't come for me, please. But, it was like, do your homework. No. Then let's dance. And I thought, are you demented? You know what I mean? That's not a curriculum. But in its core, very interesting. Okay, then let's relax the mind a little bit and let's go back to the homework. You see? So from that point, I don't say ignore it and it will go away or it becomes a huge issue, but return later to an issue when you feel better in relation to it. See what I mean?
Yeah,
That's the
absolutely.
idea.
Yeah.
You know, when you catch somebody lying to you, cheating to you, threatening you, you know, this is something I have to learn because my nature is very Mars, and I'm coming for you. You know, that's just my nature. I will come for you. So I try to not distract, but choose a different view for a moment. And then I return back to it. I'm still coming for you, but I will not destroy you like the first time. I will teach you a lesson because that's what we do in my craft, you see. But that is, I think, a good advice for a daily practice. You know, get up in the morning. First thing you do is look at the east, look at the rising of the sun if you get up that early, and say, you know, I'm grateful for all that I have. And I say yes to everything I am, everything I was, and everything I will be. Because with this thought, you build an understanding that I'm in agreement with what I am. I have people in the gym, I can't lose the weight. I can't, well, because you don't love the body the way it is. Well, it's just ugly. Well, then why should it change? You know?
And you
see
have
what I mean?
a beautiful hypnosis on weight love as well, which is
Exactly. And
incredible. Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I wanted to
Weight
do a
love.
weight loss CD that has nothing to do with loss. And I changed it to weight love. And I have people who said, you know, I didn't lose the weight, but I feel so much more comfortable, so much more better. You know, people make compliments like, have you changed? You know, did you lose weight? It is all a question of energy and not how much do I kill myself in the gym and eat ice cubes. You know, that's the idea. So I know it sounds like a cliche, but Foster is more into love than me. You know, shamanism and healing is all about love. If you don't love people, you cannot help. You cannot transform anything. It's the one generator that really moves things. So my advice for a daily practice that is easy, and you know what I mean? And we're going to have two kinds of people, Aline. People say, that sounds really reasonable and, you know, simple enough. And people who say, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
You see? That's all there's going to be.
I don't know if you heard, but my niece Margot, who's a golden retriever, just barked as you said that.
Knows very well. You see what I mean? There's going to be two kinds of people, and you choose what kind of environment you want to have around you. So my second advice for this year as a daily practice is choose your tribe.
Yeah.
Choose your tribe. You see, and Foster always says, don't let people use you as a doormat just because you're friends. You know, I haven't said enough yet in my life about abusive friendships.
Another thing, Aileen, that has been a long-term process is everything that I find is very uncomfortable for me. You know, before I did exorcisms for many years. When I was a kid, you know, I was a born again kind of Christian preacher and a teacher. And, you know, I was a healer in churches and laying on of hands and taking out spirits and all that kind of stuff. As I got older, of course, I met demons. And I met the old gods and the old goddesses, and I embraced them. So the very things that people call demons and how they talk about them in this Christian sense completely left from me. All the Christian dogma left. And everything I was so afraid of, a succubi, an incubi, you know, whatever, these other races that are here, the werewolf race or whatever, very, very few of them, but, you know, and the amazing, you know, vampires, whatever. I always had a terrible image of vampires. Then I got to know their history. I got to know who they are. And you started to have a deep respect for them, an understanding. Not that I want to be them or that I'm even seduced, but that I respect and honor all these different spirits. This is, I believe, what shamanism is when you're embracing your shadow. You're embracing, like when I first met jinns, you know, when they started making themselves known to you. You know, I bought Kristos this jinn knife with a jinn attached to it. When jinns were coming into our sphere, they started to teach us other things, other ways of seeing life. And when you put all of that together and that love of the divine that I've always had, I've always been, you know, very high, everything's high, you know, and I have a lot of friends with angels and all that kind of stuff. we started to meet the psychotic angels too. So it's not all great. But we started to discern slowly, no, let's look below. If it's above, so below, let's also look below. And I think this whole life on earth, we've really looked below. We've looked at the depths of things. We've grown our own herbs. We've learned about poisons. We've learned about everything that people reject. Oh, that's bad. That's awful. You shouldn't go there. I went there. And that's, I believe, what real courage is. It's not the courage of, I have to jump out of an airplane, which I did do, which was not a great thing for me, but, to get over a fear of heights, or dangle off a cliff, with different shamans. For me, what was very important, not just to face that fear, but the fear of the unknown, or the fear of the other side, or the fear of, leaving your body. That was probably the biggest fear, the out-of-body experience. Can I get back to my body? And why is my body paralyzed when I come back? And, how do I wake it up again? And not to be afraid to leave a body. Then I stopped being afraid of cemeteries, not being afraid of the dead. Then we studied a whole procedure of, the peacefulness of a cemetery and the spirits that are there. And what a huge opening. I have to say, that's self-acceptance. That you are all of that too. And I found that's the real shamanism, that you take a walk, and whatever you gather into your medicine bag on that walk, whatever presents itself to you as power through nature and connection, how it reflects you and nature as reminding you of who you are and life. And I love the idea of Kali, right? That she's born, and sacrifice is part of birth, that you will die. So sacrifice, and that she cuts off your head, and then you're not in your head anymore, and you're not your body, and you're already one with divine, and you have to awaken that, and that's the feminine teaching. And that you have to go up, there's 3 things of blood that come out when you cut off the head. And Kali says, these are the 3 parts of your subtle body, the Sushumna and the Ida Pingala, and you work with your subtle bodies to attain oneness. Yes. Mentality. And then once you come with that, no matter where you go, things get revealed to you. You start to see, what happened to these different races, or what happened to, fairies, whatever. There's so many different races. You grow to know them, and you love them as much as you love the clients that come to you for healing, that, you help them to understand their own psyche, their own shadows, what they're afraid of, and slowly bring them to courage, self-acceptance. Kristos, you always say you have to write down the negative traits, what are all your failings, everything on one piece of paper, or many. And then on the other side, you write down all your noble traits and attributes.
Well, in Hermetics, we have a practice, which I want to say, you can't just separate it and do it out of context. But we basically practice, and I say this carefully, the shadow. So if I would, let's say, again, I grew up in the music scene, in the club scene, in the end 80s, beginning 90s, and there was a lot of drugs everywhere. I mean, we're talking about heavy duty stuff. And to some degree, I've never been high in my life. So it's not something that called me, but it was there. Let's say hypothetically, I was prone to it. Then homeopathically, to make it, hermetically, to make it really drastic, I would have tried for 1 year a drug, and then I would have had to stop for a year the drug. And then the following year, you start again. Then you see what I mean? In other words, you take the shadow and you basically practice it to some degree. You see, again, it doesn't work out of context, but that is the theory of it. And then you stop it. To make it more easier, my teacher would smoke for a year and then stop for a year, then smoke for a year and stop for a year. So the smoking was irrelevant. It was the practice of creating a polarity in the mind and in the brain itself. You see? So the same with drinking. I could say I'm gonna, or make it much more easier when I say for a year I'm not going to eat any sugar. And then the second year I'm going to eat sugar. The third year I'm going to avoid the sugar. So it becomes a tool to exercise the mind of some degree. But again, this is more within a hermetic practice and within a school curriculum, you would say. Otherwise people would go off.
Yeah.
You know, wait, heroin 1 year, you know, of course not. But the idea is, again, with the same with, we had with Foster a little talk on our podcast, for example. I think it was the one before the last one, where the thought was also, at what point do we need to step back from spirituality? You know, and I do believe very much that when people are, I mean, let's assume that they're really disciplined in something. The goal in hermetics and in magic is that you become the habit. You don't have to practice it anymore. You see? So the meditation, I don't meditate anymore because I am quite meditative in general. I've become quite meditative. I don't close my eyes when I meditate. Now I meditate with open eyes because I don't need to close my eyes. So you see, the thing is, you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
and that is kind of also a part of evolution. So we, you know,
because you're also,
I know a famous trainer who basically said, I have this bodybuilding body, and my I can't understand why my clients are so struggling with, I just tell them, eat this and work out, eat this and work out. So he would go for a year, or I think for a year, and basically pork himself to like 300 pounds. And then he lost the weight in order to understand what his clients are going through.
wow. Yeah.
You see what I mean? He's not hermetic, he's not into magic, he's not into spirituality, for what I know, but he practices a very truthful element that we have in my school, you know. So we have to look at the shadow and meet, it's almost like travel to the black hole as close as you can, but find this edge where you're not being pulled in and you're still in control, but you're exposing to it. And I know Foster in his book, or in his books, writes about his journey and his training when they hang him upside down from some abyss. And I'm like, you nuts, you know? He's like, no, there it is. Or blindfolding, you know? We did over the years when I know Foster blindfold walks and blindfold runs. And I thought, okay, he says, now imagine this on a mountain with pretty much nothing. You're always a step from, you know, needing your health insurance, you know, hopefully, you know, but it makes total sense to me.
And now it's meditations in the void. Now it's meditations with akasha. This is the same thing as when I was blindfolded or went through these physical torments, really, as a shaman. You know, now we do it with a meditation. We enter into these black holes, even to the edge, and we understand it more. We start to see how it feels. Also the blanking of the mind in meditation, or staring at something, you know, for a long time. We are learning now really how to go into an empty space and fill it with ourselves, or get to know divinity in that empty space and feel that part of our own divinity. I think, Eileen, there's something going on with self-deification. I think many people are choosing that path of finding, you know, divinity within them, uniting with that divinity, and that's their.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
I think that's really quite happening, and that happened to me especially because Kristos taught me, you know, the Kabbalistic path. He was a Kabbalist, and we went through the Sephiras and the Tree of Life. But at the same time, after all of that and all the angelic training and dialing angels and talking to them and everything, we then went into the Qliphothic path without him saying, we're now going into the Qliphothic. So then all of a sudden, the things I never talked about, I would never talk about Lucifer or Satan or something like that. And what happened is he introduced me to, you know, underneath the Vatican is this huge temple to Lucifer. And that used to be part of the Catholic Mass and all this. Who is Lucifer? So then I had to meet Lucifer. And I know people say, oh, you shouldn't embrace Lucifer, whatever. I did. And then I understood Satan as actually that black hole, that void area, that pure kind of dark spirit, but pure. Also part of all of this creation and chaos that was part of creation that is in fact deity itself.
What Foster describes is very, I want to contribute to this a little bit. I think I want people not to be afraid to look at their shadows and not look at shadows as something bad just because it's been told. I've been told so many times, Aline, oh my God, I need an example, because you see, I try not to do it anymore, but why don't you let go, Kristos, of something? Let go of it. You're so harsh on yourself. You're so strict. You're overdoing it. You give too much. Why are you so strict with your students? And so on. And so I remember we were with Foster in a sweat lodge, my first one. And I didn't know there is a moment when you have to, in that particular sweat lodge, declare that I'm letting go of something. So of course everybody started with, I'm letting go of my, I'm going to go, and they all want something to let go of. And I'm like, holy crap, what am I letting go of? I don't know what I can let go. And I was really panicking, I was sweating in the sweat lodge for other reasons. And eventually it came to my turn. Everybody looks at me, of course, like, let's see what you're going to let go. And I hear myself say, I'm not letting go shit. I am exactly who I am. So fuck you all. I love myself. Everything I do, you all benefit from. So stop complaining like bitches. I don't let go of anything. And I go into this rant. And I'm like, I'm letting go of the idea that somebody has to tell me that I have to let go. I'm not letting go of anything. I'm letting go of the idea to let go. Okay, so guess what? Everybody else after me had exactly the same enlightenment, you see. And I thought in that moment, it just came to me, why should I let go in the first place? You have
we
to
were accepting at that time,
right? You have to forgive and let go. Right.
We were in a meditation actually at that time between how do we embrace the me, what is me, and what is not me.
Yeah.
They are both parts of ourselves, me and not. We embrace it all.
But it was interesting because it came in that one moment. It just came through me. And I said, I'm letting go of the idea that I have to let go of something so that you can feel comfortable with me.
Sounds like a really good example of the water rabbit mentality as well.
There you go. That's the idea. And so I said, I'm not letting go of anything. And I refuse again to be bullied by this. Let it go. You have to forgive. Let it go. I don't want to forgive. Eventually I'll do, but until then I'll enjoy my revenge. Because I am a vengeful being. I believe that revenge is a very powerful healing tool. Yes. And that depends what it is. I mean, so again, if somebody feels that they need to cross my boundaries, then I'm going to come after them. But if it's something like, for a long time, I hated my brother-in-law. He was an idiot. This is not a secret, He was a lovely person, but a difficult person who made everybody's life difficult. So in the end, I couldn't stand him, and I chose not to forgive him because, I enjoyed it too much. It made sense not to forgive him. It made sense. I acknowledge that this is a real feeling, and it's a real experience. I don't want to let go of it. Eventually, maybe I forgive him, maybe. But more important is, why do I need to forgive? Why do I need to be the bigger person? You see, why do I need to be the understanding one? These are all aspects of being bullied in our society. Nothing else. You see, like women are, you are ingrained with this idea. You have to be the forgiving part. You have to be the bigger person. And suddenly a woman says, I'm taking my kids, your money in the house, and you're out. And suddenly you're a bitch, You see what I mean? Yeah. You see, well, the moment you choose to acknowledge yourself You know, for men, it's a little different, I have to say, but for women, it's quite in your face, you see. So my advice is don't let go. Why should you let go?
Well, we do a practice where you bring the spirit of the person that's your enemy, the person you're in confrontation with.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually talk to their spirit and hear their perspective. And then they talk to you. And if you can accept their perspective, if you can understand it, there's a tremendous healing, like a ho'oponopono, a ho'opono, when you're in Hawaii and you go through the deep forgiveness because now you understand both sides. And that's the end of polarity. I'm not polarized to you. I don't have any more animosity towards you, actually. So it kind of dissolves. So there's nothing to let go of here. It finds a point of bindu or whatever, a point of balance. And I love those moments. And I always cultivate those moments like a garden. I want to know all my enemies. I'm happy to meet them and hear their perspective and slowly understand what it means in me, because I try to get to the very essence of what they're saying, even the essence of their pain, even if they're just talking from their pain. And then comes the compassion. It's nothing you do. It's something that floods you because you have an understanding. That's how I've always gone through things. So if I get really, really angry at somebody, I feel like, you cheated me out of all this money. And, because we're in capitalism, a lot of people cheat you out of money when you're buying a house or whenever you're doing, we went through all this recently. And they, you'd make a lot of bad decisions because they give you some very bad choices. And, you think those are the choices. And then you find out later, I really didn't think broad enough. I really wasn't listening and I took the wrong choice, and you lose a lot of money. And you're left with, do I curse these people, really have led me astray and I've lost my money? Or do I see it from their side that they're stumbling in the dark? They're really quite ignorant. They have no idea what they're doing when they're selling a house or when they're, trying to show you a house. They don't really know their job. They're just, playing some role, something they've adopted, but they're not really very good at it. Then you take a deep breath, you understand their perspective, and you just avoid them from then on. You know what I mean? But you've made peace in you. It's not about them. And Kristos, I always need to make peace. I mean, for Kristos's life, it was much harder. He went through sexual abuse. He went through a lot of things. Very, very hard for him to make peace with somebody who really keeps doing it and nobody comes to your aid. You know what I mean? That's why a lot of times you want to be there for people. You want to be the one that comes to their aid, where they can talk about their sexual abuse or the terrible things that happen in their life, and you're a listener. You don't judge, you don't contribute, you don't do anything, you listen. And then you show them, well, you could do this, you could possibly do this. You give them choices of how to resolve this unbelievable hurt inside of them. Because humanity has the capacity to hurt each other to a degree we can't yet imagine. Over centuries now. So it builds up, and eventually you have to get to the point of the release, where you finally understand something and the polarity is not there, and you're not against life. You're not against them or yourself. You see both sides now. I think that has been the very best thing, the self and the not self, to embrace both. This is to me the big yes. This is coming home for me. Embracing all this wonderful darkness, and because I come from so much light, to have both and to be at home in both, I think has been the great delight of this whole life. And of course, I don't have to do it alone. I have somebody in my life. I'm not alone. All the time, you become a yogi, you become a shaman, you're always alone. You do your practice and you're not really alone. You're not lonely or anything. You're connected to everything, but you have somebody by your side who's doing their path too. And you love them no matter what, with unconditional love, really, and all their habits and everything. And you still want to be there. You still want to wash their dishes. But I always say to Kristos, I'm here and I still want to wash your dishes.
Because I'm cooking.
I love it.
I can't do both.
Or borrow my car, or take my clothes, or whatever.
Oh, I'll take it. I'll take it.
I want to share everything. I don't really want to keep it all for myself anymore. This is mine, that's yours. All that is part of relationship. And And I have to say, I have really enjoyed even the mundane quality of it. Because, you know, we really do take a lot of risks. We really do a lot of things on the edge. So it's kind of lovely that we have a reference point and we have a sanctuary to come to in us and then together.
So you're getting ready for your tour soon, aren't you, as well, in a month? You're visiting everybody. I'm going to
Europe,
Japan. And Japan. I'm going to put all the links for everything because there is so much. There is the incredible music from Kristos, incredible hypnosis. There's incredible music together. There are all the Vimeos. There's the higher mind training, which is phenomenal. And you're doing that again soon, aren't you? In an English version.
In English,
yeah.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. That's it, about a week
do it in English and in German, I think. Yeah.
Okay, fabulous.
Both of them.
Yeah, and also the witchcraft with astrology, which is coming up this weekend, I think, is it? Yeah.
It's
Next week and
next week.
Sorry,
next week.
there's me with time. There's no.
I don't know.
I'll post it. I'll put it all underneath anyway. Mind you, when this is posted, it might be next weekend.
It is at some point in.
I'll put everything on there.
I have to look it up.
Don't worry, I will put everything on there.
Okay, thank you.
Because you are both incredible, and just thank you so much. So you're going to be on tour, seeing people in person again. You're still doing your online sessions. So if anybody would like to do online sessions with you, which are also incredible, you can do those online if you can't get to Kristos and Foster in various countries. And then also the huge sacred tour to Japan. Can you talk a little bit about
I cannot wait to go to Japan. Because Japan, again, is a gate, is a portal. You know, it has incredible. It is on the same level like Egypt for me. It's on the same level like Peru. You know, these kind of places. But remember, when you go to Peru now, for example, Machu Picchu, they don't like spiritual tourism anymore. No meditation, no sitting, no gathering, no nothing. Next, they've realized what a popular place it is. So that is over. Egypt, of course, you have to fight yourself through sometime because it's such a country on the edge sometimes, you know what I mean? With all the social inequalities that you're witnessing, basically. It's a very different mentality of you know, very different. And just because the people live in Egypt and they see the pyramids every day, it doesn't mean they acknowledge it as what it is. They're completely oblivious of it. But Japan is on the same level for me, and it is in its nature healing. It is in its nature healing, simply from a point of social development, from a level of hygiene, which was the first time when I went, I was shocked how clean it was. There's no garbage anywhere because it's a bad look. So it doesn't resonate nice to have garbage cans outside, which is, you know, and simply the openness of spirit. Because you can be Muslim, you can be a witch, you can be a Satanist, you can be a Christian, you can be a Buddhist, you can be anything you want. You never hear, as far as I know, you never heard of a terrorist attack in Japan. Never happened. Because they're open. You see, they're totally fine. You're what? Okay. The way we've been received the first time we went, and you know, we had to show them, of course, what we do. It was like, okay, explain to me. They're very open people, very interested, but also they acknowledge spirit, ghosts, lost. You know, there is a great tradition in their belief system of souls that don't pass over. With the tsunami area, for example, there's a fantastic I think a documentary about it, how people in that area, taxi drivers, pick up totally wet people sometimes and drive them to a certain place, and then they disappear in their car. So they're called free ghost rides, because they say we do know that these souls never transitioned. They're still in a state of shock, and we just get them to one place to another. Like it's the most normal thing, you see. And that is so interesting with Japan, because it is embedded in their nature, and they have gods. They're polytheistic. So it's a country of witches, basically, you know. If you would look at like Greece, we're not orthodox, we're polytheistic. Let's be real, right? India, witches, polytheistic. Mexicans, you know, when I hear Mexicans and they're all about Jesus, and I'm like, you're not Catholic, guys. You know what I mean? You have a complete different. This is the idea where I think that places like Japan, for example, provide already, when you arrive, a certain path in which you can experience yourself, you know, without making a big religion out of it, if you want. But it's a normal concept. The tradition of cleansing yourself. Foster talks about purification. These onsens. I mean, the Japanese is a clean human being. Clean, you see, very organized, very structured. You see, and we think it's too strict at times. But, and let's not pretend they don't have problems. I think they have the highest suicide rate in the world. When you don't catch up with the requirement, you see, there's a disbalance again. So, but for a spiritual purpose, I said, I can't wait to go again, because it was such a refined, beautiful environment, and it really provided a great source of spirit communication, which I want to do, and also healings in general. It's just a great healing place in general, you know. So this is definitely and from what I know it's going to happen, because, you know, people are a little late, but they have to, you know, catch up now. Sure. And Japan also, what we talked with Foster about, why we chose Japan again, because it was closed for 3 years. You see, and this is the first chance they open up, I think, for groups also again, but it has to be a small group. That's why I'm saying to people, it's going to be limited. I can't bring 50 people. It's impossible. So we're going to be around 10-ish, maybe 12, 13, but that is the limit. You see, it's a small group. And then the cherry blossoms, and then, you know,
trees, unbelievable trees.
It's
Mount Fuji.
I'm telling you, it's a beautiful place. We went the last time, just to bring it in, Aline. We went to, because it was on the way to Aokigahara, which is a very famous forest where people go, disappear, and kill themselves. In other words, the Japanese doesn't leave a mess when it decides to commit suicide. They go into a forest. And it's a very famous forest where people, you know, it's really large. It's like the Black Forest in Germany, I think, where suddenly after a year or two you find a skeleton hanging there, or somebody there, which is very interesting. That forest is a portal. There is a portal. So instinctively, when people go there, I don't say do it for Christ's sake, but if they go there, and I thought, why this forest? Because the trees have compassion for humans. And they understand it's too much sometimes. So we're providing you with a aid or a portal by which it is easier to transition. You see? So I said, can we go there? And Naturga goes, well, we can do it, Kristos-san. She was like, why the hell did you go there? But she was very polite. Harumi, we're going to meet her again, and I'm ecstatic. And I explained it to her, and she said, you know, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's a very peaceful place, sad but peaceful place, but it's an interesting approach in that society. If I end my life, I'm not going to do it with you know, hand grenades and on TikTok, right? They're going in a silent place, in a quiet place. I don't want to leave a mess. I don't want to burden anybody with my. It is very sad, but there's also
honor.
It's a big thing, you see. There's a certain beauty in the sadness sometimes, you know. it's difficult to explain, but that's the idea. But it is it's a place where when I went the first time, I thought I could live here from a spiritual point. Where people go to Egypt, they go to, you know, other places. For me, surprisingly, it was Japan. It was the most spiritually active gate, not the whole island, of course, but, you know, a great deal of it. And the places we went, Kyoto and Osaka, are vibing, I have to say. We didn't go to Tokyo because I don't need another New York. But then we went to Mount Fuji. So these are places where it's a must. It's a bucket list, basically. And you can feel it. You definitely can. And then you bring yourself into, of course, in your practice, and then it gets elevated. It's a stunning place. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing this. You see, I'm excited about it because I've been, and I'm like, I wish everybody could experience this.
I'm excited for you.
No. That's the idea. Right. That's the idea.
I think the thing I liked about Japan the most, the last time we went, is that everybody bought each other dinner.
Right.
That's lovely.
Like
Right.
one night somebody volunteered, the next night somebody else, and everybody just wanted to do it out of the generosity of their heart.
Right. Because we had such a nice group, you know, and they bonded, and everyone said, okay, it's my treat today. It's my treat today. And
everybody helped each other. Everybody was kind. Everybody was
so lovely.
And that's what impressed me more than anything.
And that is something that on our tours, I have to say, I've never seen that kind of bonding.
Wow.
You know, that kind of willingness to really go as a group happened only there.
It's a deep kindness.
Yeah.
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 We had that before Kristos. We had that in India where everybody went for enlightenment. Everybody went for practice. And they came back transformed, and they all bonded.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were together in one idea.
Right. Which is the tribal concept, you see.
Sure. And the oneness. Yeah.
The oneness, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you so much for being
Thank you,
here.
Aline.
I don't know how long we've been on, but thank you
Time is an illusion.
so much. It's been an absolute honor. I will make sure all the correct information is on there for people to find you, because I know everybody knows you anyway, but I really feel that there's a lot of people who are ready to meet you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So thank
and we're
you
ready
so
to meet
much.
them.
Sorry?
And we are ready to meet them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Aline, so much. I hope that this podcast is a big blessing for you and that you keep going it. And, you know, because it's about time, girl.
Thank you. That's why I said at the beginning about Come On Arlene. There's actually a song that people used to sing to me called Come On Arlene, and that
it's true. There you go. It's better than Macarena. We had a translator named, she said, if I hear this song one more time, I'm going to kill somebody. Because people had to do it, you know. It's like, even Paul's like, Macarena. She's like, shut up.
The worst is Lola, unfortunately. Her name is Lola. Everybody sings some song. Terrible. Or Lolita.
It's all good. It's all good.
Thank you so much. I'm still giggling. So thank you. And I wish you a wonderful tour. I wish you many blessings in all of your workshops, and I will be there for most of them. And I wish you many, many blessings in Japan, and well, always.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bless you. Bless you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Hello, gorgeous. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Please do like, share, follow, review, all of that good stuff. And so we can grow, so we can reach more and more people who are beginning to accept their sensitivity for the gift that it truly is. With so much love, thank you for all my guides. Thank you for all my guests. Thank you for you. Ho.